And this is Let 'em Talk. I'm Walt DeRienzo.
And I'm Miss Joan Moossy.
And we're here weekly, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Our guest tonight is Les Jamieson, who is the New York 911 Coalition. And it's a group that's looking into alternative views as to what it is that might have been responsible for 9/11.
So thanks for coming and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great.
And let's take a look at the photograph behind us. What is that a photograph of? Just so folks know right at the beginning.
Sure. This is a photograph of the Pentagon on the morning of 9/11, just after the attack was carried out there, the impact, and this is prior to the collapse of the roof, which happened 20 minutes after. So this is very, very soon after the object hit it. And when I say object, maybe we'll get into that later. But that's what we're looking at. And the thing to notice here is the lawn, how it's basically untouched, unscathed, and which is a very, very big question.
Now, where did this picture come from?
This is from basically from the news media that were there, and it was obtained by researchers, and among several types of photos like this, and this is just one that's very important. And this is some of the evidence that we do have, since there's been such little evidence presented by the media. And the reason why we're looking at this one is because last week the media finally, the government, the DOD actually finally released a Pentagon video of what they're saying is Flight 77 hitting it. And this is
hitting the Pentagon.
Hitting the
Pentagon.
Pentagon.
That's what, for folks who don't know, this is a picture of the Pentagon in Washington, near Washington, Arlington, Virginia, which was hit, according to the official story, by plane number 77.
Flight 77, right. It's American Airlines, which is a Boeing 757. And so finally, a week ago, due to a FOIA request by Judicial Watch, that was finally able to be released as a result of the ending of the Moossy trial. No one knows why they withheld this video to use in the Moossy trial of Zacharias Moossy, who is called the, quote, 20th hijacker. Anyway, since that trial ended a few weeks back, finally they released this video, and it was incredible because there
was being held as evidence in the Moossy trial.
Yes, and nobody has any clue what the attack on the Pentagon had to do with the Moossy trial. It's a big mystery. And but in this event, it was a major media event that happened last week. There was a couple of hours of buildup, of hype, saying the Pentagon is about to release this dramatic video, and once and for all, we're going to be able to see Flight 77 and all the conspiracy theories, which they use that term over and over and over again. All the conspiracy theories are going to be put to rest once and for all.
Well, now, the group that you work with,
yes,
you disagree with the official story about September 11th.
Yes, very
now,
much so.
Would you consider yourself a conspiracy theorist, or?
That's a good question, Joan. And no, I'm a researcher, an investigator, and a detective. That's all we do. We do detective work.
And do you still think it's a mystery, or have you come up with your own theory about what happened?
A lot of aspects of 9/11 are a mystery, and there are certain aspects that we can come to conclusions. For instance, the collapse of the towers here in Lower Manhattan, Tower 1 and 2 and Building 7 that fell. 3 buildings that are steel-framed structures fell that one day, but never before or after in history has this occurred. And Building 7 was not even hit by an airplane that fell.
I always thought we were so lucky that they didn't go like that.
Yeah.
Because it would have hurt so many more people.
So what you're describing? And first of all, we're going to give the viewers a chance. I didn't get a chance to get our number up. We're live. I didn't get our number up, so I'm going to have to read it off to folks who don't know the on-air number. And you're
so write it down.
Welcome to call. So write it down. I'm going to say, all right, 212-757. How ironic. 1538. 212-757-1538.
So call us up.
And we're looking forward to your calls and any questions you might have for Les Jamieson of New York 911. And we're talking about alternative ideas about what could have happened at both the Pentagon and World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001. And as Manhattan residents, most of us watching tonight, many of us had a very personal connection. I myself was barely 6-7 blocks away at the studios of the radio station I was working at 120 Wall Street, and was on air, actually broadcasting on WBAI. The morning show as a news reporter that morning when 9/11 happened. And I remember just the shock of going into the mode of reporting this live tragic event as it happened that day, and going out later in the evening after the 7 World Trade Center collapsed, because electricity was still being supplied to Lower Manhattan until that building collapsed, because according to the rescue workers, they wanted to wait. They needed electricity for the rescue equipment, and then once it collapsed, when you have to go in there and rescue potential victims, that way you want all the electricity to be at that point turned off.
Yes.
So they turned off the electricity. So we were fortunate enough to be able to stay on the air, in part because our antenna was at the Empire State Building.
Yes.
We were one of the few people on the air at the time, and also because the electricity was allowed to stay on at least until about 5 o'clock that afternoon, when 7 World Trade Center collapsed, which we didn't know until afterwards. I discovered this afterwards.
Yes.
So just to give some idea to folks, put it in some sort of context of time and spatial
Well, to have
area.
a little bit of background, I'd also like to ask, how soon after September 11th did you begin doing the research that you've done, and did you begin to question the story? At what point?
Yeah, about 2 months later, in
2
November.
months.
Yes, I was listening to WBAI, and I heard a very, very important reporter, investigator named Ralph Schoenman, Taking Aim, and he did an incredible program called 9/11. It's a long title. I don't know if it'll come to me, but he right then and there, he was talking about the investigation into the alleged hijackers, Project for New American Century, these geostrategic aspects of
the
9/11.
neocons, the neoconservatives.
The neoconservatives, exactly.
The folks behind Rumsfeld, Freith. Oh, we can go through all the names. They've been mentioned in numerous
Cheney,
books.
Libby, Wolfowitz, all these
We have
people.
a call already.
But we have a call. We're going to go to our phones and see what's up. You're on with Let Them Talk. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, hello, hi.
Hi.
Go ahead.
What's your name?
My name is Carl.
And
Carl?
Where are you calling from, Carl?
I'm calling from Manhattan,
What part of Manhattan? Neighborhood?
Stuyvesant Town.
All right.
So do you have a question for Les?
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment. I just want to say, whatever conspiracy you believe in, number one rule, be careful what you believe in, you could be wrong. And I would say, don't jump to conclusions, because the U.S. has a lot of enemies, and the person or persons who could have been responsible for 9/11 might not necessarily be the people you think they are. Like, you remember the Manchurian Candidate?
Oh,
we were so
movie.
busy chasing after the Russians, the Chinese might have been the bad guys. So, look, I spoke to a guy the other day who thinks, the Israelis were responsible for killing John F. Kennedy. So, you never know. Look, they always use a small lie to cover a big lie. So, use your common sense and go with your own feelings and forget about what the rest of the world has to say, okay?
What
I
do you
think that's good
Caller?
advice.
Good advice, Caller. What do you think?
All right, so anyway, good luck, and keep up the good work, okay?
All right, Carl,
Okay,
thanks for
bye-bye.
calling.
Okay,
I'd like
thank
to
you,
just
Carl.
Bye-bye.
give a quick response,
Sure.
Go right ahead.
which is through the process of questioning what happened 9/11, there are so many things that are glaring, such as the absence of our air defense, which is unprecedented. Anytime a jet goes slightly off course, NORAD, the Northern Air Force Command, gets notified, and they send up fighter jets within a matter of sometimes 10 minutes. And this happens, I've heard, like on an average, sometimes 100 times a year.
Oh,
And in
wow.
the previous calendar year, it was documented 67 times this occurred.
Really?
Now, on 9/11, 4 times jets go off course, and no fighter response comes to the rescue. This has to be looked at. So that's one aspect that is a glaring question. the foreknowledge. There were years and years of warnings. In that summer of 2001, there were months of warnings. Matter of fact, George Tenet, when in the 9/11 Commission hearings, was saying that we were on red alert. We were running around with our hair on fire. And Richard Clark wrote how he was the counterterrorism expert for the administration. He was saying how we're trying to get meetings with the president, FaceTime with the president. Condoleezza Rice did everything to ignore that because she was the go-between. Things like this have to be investigated. And the 9/11 Commission was not authorized for 14 months after 9/11.
Now, is that unusual in terms of reassessing a situation that's happened? Like,
Yes. Like, for instance, the Challenger space shuttle, when it went down, was maybe a few days, 4 days.
oh, before they began
Right away,
investigating.
they had to go investigate. And
You're
same thing.
listening to Let Them Talk. This is Let Them Talk. I'm Paul DeRienzo. Our guest is Les Jamieson of the New York 9/11.
NY 9/11 Truth.
NY 11 Truth. Okay, tell them.
Sure. It's New York 9/11 Truth. Our website is ny911truth.org. And we have a hotline as well for people who may not be online, which is 212-714-7147.
Better repeat
And
that number again.
go ahead.
Sure, 212-714-7147. And I'd just like to say, for those of you who are already, onto this issue and looking for ways to get involved, please come to our series called the 9/11 Info Resource Series on Sunday nights, 6:30, St. Mark's Church, 2nd Avenue and 10th Street. We're
In
there
Manhattan.
in Manhattan. We're there most every week. You can get the schedule from our website or from that hotline that I just gave you. And lastly, I'd just like to say that on Saturdays, we've been holding vigils, outreach actions at Ground Zero for almost 3 years. Every Saturday from 12:30 to 4 o'clock, weather permitting. And this is a way to come, get involved, to distribute literature and engage the public in an educational process to bring up the alternative theories of 9/11.
And while everybody's got your pencils out, remember that the phone number here is 212-757-1538.
212-757-1538, and this is Let Them Talk, so we want to let you talk
So call in with your questions.
with your questions. Let's, I want to talk about the motivations, because maybe really what it comes down to at this point is what possible and potential motivation would the United States government or some elements within the United States government have to wreak this kind of destruction upon,
Well, wait, is that the
upon, I just want
theory?
to finish this one, upon their own people, killing thousands of people in order to, why? Why
But
would
is
they
that
do
the
this?
theory that that's what happened as opposed to is that what you believe happened?
Yes, that it could not have occurred alone by some Arab terrorists these were amateur pilots with box cutters, and there's so many indications, like experts, like there was a man by the name of Colonel Don de Grand Prix who convened, I think about 70 former Air Force military pilots, FAA people, that said that these 4 hijackings everything about them were completely unorthodox. For instance, an experienced pilot knows that if they're getting challenged, there's a hijacking going on, they do evasive maneuvers. Like they take the plane and put everything off balance or turn it upside down, literally. So none of these kind of things happened. And
No, but just to reiterate, so your theory is that someone in the United States government
yes.
was involved in making September 11th happen.
Yes, a faction at the highest levels of the military intelligence or apparatus, and
Well, then I say back to Paul's question, why?
Why would they do so?
Exactly,
Why on earth
exactly.
would someone do that to their own countrymen?
On the day of 9/11, plans to invade Afghanistan were already formulated. Plans to invade Iraq were already formulated. They needed a pretext. And this is why we have to understand, folks, Project for a New American Century, it's a ultra-right-wing think tank. And if you go to the website, newamericancentury.org, and there's a link for publications, you download this document. It's called Rebuilding America's Defenses. and you read it right there. It says, in order to create full spectrum dominance, the American people would only support this type of agenda with a catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. And this is their words. So if you look at the agenda for war and global aggression, this is what we see
Now, where
before us,
did you-
plus the Patriot Act. This is the other issue. 6 weeks after 9/11, the Patriot Act was rammed through Congress in 6 weeks' time.
And where did you get the information that the plans to invade Afghanistan and Iraq were already in force? Where did you find that information?
Yes, as far as Iraq, this was in mainstream news that Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld, and Cheney, they met that evening in the White House. Richard Clark wrote about it, okay? And as well as several other aspects.
Right. This is several reports in the books by Bob Woodward, for example.
Yeah.
I think as well where he wrote about both Bush at war. He wrote the book, and also before that he wrote another book about the planning of the Iraq War.
Yeah.
And basically the idea for going into Iraq was discussed literally the night of the attack of September 11th, and pretty much everybody has admitted that.
Exactly.
So not
Exactly.
before, but the night
Of.
afterwards.
Right, but
After
al-
the event.
but
had
before
begun.
as well.
Oh, I
Before as
see.
well, yeah.
Exactly. Paul Wolfowitz sent a big letter of request to invade Iraq to Clinton in 1997.
Okay.
So there's a long-standing agenda. And as far
And the war plan had already been, Bush had called for a war plan almost the day he got into office.
yes,
And in fact, that Woodward's book is about the war plan that they set up right from almost the day Bush got into office
See,
to launch a war
all they needed-
against Iraq.
all they needed was the pretext. Now, it's also very important.
I'm not necessarily agreeing with that, although
Yes.
I think you make a strong argument. That's why
Yes,
I have you
sure,
on here, and we
sure.
want to hear that.
Absolutely.
Although I agree with many of the facts that you are putting out.
Yes,
That's
yes.
true. They really actually
And
those things are accurate.
Well, I'd like
This-
to remind everybody about
Yeah,
our
right.
phone number. So in case anybody'd
Yeah.
like to ask a question themselves, it's 212-757-1538.
That's
So
two-
call us up.
Yes, this is Let Them Talk. So again, it's 212-757-1538. I'm Paul DeRienzo with Miss Joan Marie Moossy, and our guest is Les Jamieson, and we're talking about 9/11 and alternative ideas of what possibly could have happened. It's a big gap. I mean, to make a jump that folks could be so depraved, so criminal, so evil
Yes.
as to commit a crime like that
Yes.
is one has to get their mind around it.
Yes.
And I'd like to know what the viewers are thinking about this. And you must have a lot of interesting reactions when you go on Saturdays to Ground Zero
Yes.
and picket. What are some of the reactions you get from citizens?
Well, the majority of people are curious and open, and they look at our literature and really study it. And we get people from all over the world there, and also all over the country here visiting New York. And we do get a minority of people who challenge us, and just cannot. Especially, I'll say this: Americans from rural areas, because we as a country are so well insulated to these larger issues, extreme issues of war and aggression and geostrategic positioning that are the reality of our foreign policy. So these people who basically, they get their news from CNN and Fox News. It's very difficult for a lot of them to make the stretch, and it's unfortunate, but it's just that this is the
Well, do you
lack of
consider-
information.
Do you consider your idea a theory, or do you believe that this is a fact?
It's fact, because just from
We have a call.
Oh, we
Should
do.
go to the phone?
Yes,
That's good. We'll
absolutely.
leave it as
Sure.
a fact, and we'll go to the call. You're
Hello?
on. You're on.
Hello?
Hello?
Go ahead. Your name, please.
My name is Robert. I just
Hey,
joined
Robert.
your program just a moment ago.
Great.
It's good to see you talking about this. But I don't know if your guest has discussed Building 7, which ironically was just reopened by Mr. Silverstein. But skeptics out there, all you have to do really is Google WTC7 and Larry Silverstein, and there's there's a wealth of information, but also video evidence. With just all the chaos of that day, people tend to forget, you know, at 5:30, Building 7 just fell like a house of cards. Like
Right.
there was nothing even holding it up. It's,
Yes. Every
Okay.
characteristic of controlled demolition.
And those, I mean, those towers too. I mean, they were just enormous. I mean, forget about a plane hitting them. Just imagine if a fire broke out on the 95th floor, say, and all the jet fuel burnt up outside of the building.
Correct.
The massive steel cores, and I mean, it's just there's no way a fire brought those down. And then for motive, if you want to think about it, I mean, if there was a small group of people who stood to profit in the tens of billions of dollars, I mean, $300 billion going to Iraq. Is that all for rations and for military expenditure? I mean, you tell me a couple of billion here or there get lost, like anyone's going to notice? I mean, there's actually news
That's
that
so
that's
sad,
happened.
though, isn't it?
So for a cold, calculating, heartless billionaire to begin with to sacrifice 3,000 lives to profit and ensure him and their family, their organization's future for decades to come.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard for regular, upstanding citizens to even think about that and just get in that
It's hard for me to
mindset.
think
But
about that. I think that's so
You know,
sad.
it is, to put it in context of how, you know, an event could be orchestrated by our government that will result in deaths of 3,000 people. Let's remember, they told hundreds of thousands of people who live and work in Manhattan the air was safe to breathe after. You know,
Yeah,
we're
that's
finding
the
out
other
now that a lot of people are sick, and there've been already many deaths, and there will be a lot more. So just put that into perspective. Also, historically, there was an event called Operation Northwoods in 1962, where they were going to do the same thing. Operation Northwoods, please go on the internet, Google that, where they were going to create a terrorist incident with deaths of American citizens in order to create the pretext to invade Cuba.
Right. That is true.
Exactly.
And that was orchestrated by the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the
Joint
time.
Chiefs of Staff.
Absolutely, well established. And it was a dangerous time in the 1960s, and what you're claiming is that we're living in a similar dangerous time.
Yes.
Now, today, Osama bin Laden, a voice alleged to be Osama bin Laden, was released. It's been all over the media for the second time, claiming personal responsibility for 9/11, claiming that Moussaoui was,
yeah.
in fact, had nothing to do with it, and that many of the people in Guantanamo had nothing to do with it, and that he personally ordered this. Here is Osama bin Laden saying you're wrong, that no. the
And we
government
have
Osama
didn't
bin
do it.
Laden initially denied this a few days after that, and not until our military raided a village in Afghanistan and found a videotape of a guy who, with a
Yes.
beard, who, you know, all those people, you know, quote, look the same to us, I guess, in America. Someone who is supposed to be Osama bin Laden on videotape, you know, just admitting the whole thing. When he initially denied it, the Taliban denied it, everyone denied it.
Sure, sure.
And that's not really the terrorist typical MO. I mean, they're usually the first, you know, if someone
That's a good
they
point.
claim responsibility. That's
That's a
what
good
they
point.
do.
We have another call coming in, caller.
Sure, I'll let you go.
All
Thank you
right,
very
nice
much for that.
talking to
Very
you,
good.
Robert.
And hi, you're on. What's your name?
Hello?
Hello,
Hi.
What's your name?
John.
Hi, John.
How you doing?
Thanks for calling.
Got a comment or a question?
A question. I've had trouble with conspiracists generally, but I have looked at all of the photographs of the Pentagon crash, the stills that were released early on, and then the DoD tape last week, and I see nothing that indicates a big plane has crashed in front of or into the Pentagon. So my question is, what did cause the fire in the Pentagon? Where did it come from? And, of course, where the devil is the plane?
Yeah.
Great question.
Right? Can we answer that? Is that we've seen the video? The video they released shows a pretty. In the program I sat through on Sunday showed over and over again. It's a blur, really.
Yes.
Can you really tell what? Well, tell me some of the. We don't have the. We're not showing it here, but it's a blur. Many people have seen it. What's missing from that film that was released of the security camera
Sure,
that doesn't
sure.
convince you?
Well, you don't see a fuselage, you don't see a tail section, wings, jet engines, and what you do see is like a tiny nose cone that to me looks like more like a missile than anything else. And the impact
Thank you, Paul.
the impact, the 16-foot hole, round hole, does look like a missile of some type or a global hawk. These are the things that we can pretty logically speculate on.
Les Jamieson, we have another call.
Do we have
Oh,
time
great.
for
Go
one
on the
more?
phone.
Oh, good.
Sure. Wait, it was coming in. I
Yeah.
guess we
Okay.
don't. I thought we did. Okay, our number
Sure.
is
Call back.
212-757-1538. Les Jamieson, and we're talking about alternative ideas and theories about what happened on 9/11, and a very frightening and scary scenario.
Okay,
that-
here's the call.
Here we go.
Yeah.
You're on.
Hello?
Hello, yes, I'd like to ask a question.
Your
Sure.
name, please.
Okay.
Your name, please.
Rory from the Lower East Side.
Hi, Rory. Go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, Rory.
Okay, I'd like to know the thing about... Hi, Les. How you doing? I'd like to know the thing about when they were talking about bin Laden, the telltale thing was... hold on a second. Hugo, can you turn off the TV for a second? Sure. All right. The telltale thing was he looked like Red Fox. He obviously wasn't bin Laden.
Yes.
Why didn't they ever, correct that? I mean, do you know what I mean?
Okay, the bin Laden tape that's been referred to twice now is a tape that was found in December of 2001 in Jamalabad, in the rubble, I guess, which is suspicious to start with, right?
Right.
And the video, the picture of that bin Laden where they're basically celebrating the attacks, and our media presented this as bin Laden confessing to 9/11.
Right.
This is a fraudulent tape because when you look at this man's face, he weighs about 15 pounds, 20 pounds
At least.
more than the
I
actual
forgot
bin
about
Laden.
the nose.
Yeah, and the nose is
And the rings.
longer, the forehead, the eyebrows.
They're not allowed to
And we
Are
need-
you saying Bin Laden doesn't exist?
And,
No.
he was right-handed,
We're saying
and
it was
bin Laden's
it's a-
left-handed.
Right. We're saying it was a double. That this was an imposter, an actor of some sort. So this was a manufactured, fabricated video. And another important thing is about bin Laden is the U.S. government went to the Taliban right after the attacks and said, "Turn him over to us." And the Taliban said, "Sure, we'll turn him over. Just provide us the evidence that it was him."
Unbelievable, as the whole thing is.
Well, thanks for
All right,
calling. We
thank
want to
you.
give Les
Okay,
a
bye-bye.
chance to wrap up because
Yeah.
we're coming to the end
Sure.
of
Right,
the
Les,
show.
Sure.
we're going to the show
Sure.
here. Go
Let
ahead.
me
Tell
see.
them your contact information, please.
Sure. Our organization is called New York 9/11 Truth. Our website is ny911truth.org. Our hotline is 212-714-7147. Come on down to Ground Zero this Saturday at 12:30.
This is Let Them Talk. I'm Paul and Joni. We'll see you next Tuesday. Thank you very much for joining us on Let Them Talk.
That's it.
That's it.